What's up, Raptors fans? Welcome to the Warriors Report. We have some very exciting news to talk to you about. This was being reported late last night. Well, it's not last night for me because I'm still awake recording this, but this was being reported late yesterday, and it was tweeted out by NBA Central that the Toronto Raptors are closely monitoring Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's situation in Oklahoma City per TSN. And the reporter who was reporting this was none other than Raptors reporter Josh Lewenberg. Now, this was quite surprising because we normally don't hear reports like this from Josh Lewenberg, who usually sticks to the safe reports, but very interesting news regardless. And it's fun to talk about this because it is the off season. And yes, I know people are going to be quick to suggest that Raptors don't league, all this fun stuff, but guys, it's off season. And this is definitely a player I could see the Raptors being interested in. But for today's video, I'm going to be discussing what impact would Shai Gilgeous-Alexander have on the Toronto Raptors. I'm going to touch on his stats a little bit and how the Raptors may be able to trade for him and some of the obstacles that may be in place if the Raptors do try to trade for someone like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So if you're ready to watch this video, guys, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Let's try to get this video to 110 likes. And if you want to hit the subscribe button as well, that would be very much appreciated. So that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, as you guys know, I do like to give out shout outs on my channel. And for today's video, the shout out goes out to Darshan Siva. So Darshan, thank you so much for supporting this channel to your likes and comments. It is very much appreciated. Now, let's quickly touch upon Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's statistics here, because I find that this is very important to really emphasize on some of his strengths of his game, not only just statistical wise, but what he could provide for the Toronto Raptors. Now, looking at last season with Oklahoma City Thunder here, you see he put up an amazing and unreal 24.5 points, while doing so averaging 5 rebounds, 5.9 assists, and also getting 1.3 steals a game. And another aspect of this, any player I really like that the Raptors acquire is free throw percentages, something I've highlighted in the past. If a player is able to hit his free throws, it makes it so much easier to play that player in late game situations because you don't have to worry about that player being intentionally fouled and not being able to hit his free throws. Now, that is a huge aspect of any player that the Raptors acquire because it allows them to play them in late game situations. And I know his 3-point percentage was down this past year. 30% isn't great, but the previous season he clearly has the potential to hit it at a really high clip. I mean, 41.8% is absolutely fabulous as well. So I mean, I really like this player for several reasons. I think it's crazy not to talk about him because there's so many connections we can make here. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a Canadian-born player and he is from Toronto. So this is obviously would be huge for the Raptors as well as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, because not only are you acquiring a Canadian-born player, you're also acquiring one that Nick Nurse, Raptors head coach, is familiar with. We know Nick Nurse is coaching Team Canada and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander does play for Team Canada, so there's a lot of familiarity between the coach and the player as well. And obviously Nick Nurse has spoken highly of him several times. So this would be a match made in heaven. And also take into consideration that Shai is listed at 6'6". He can play the point guard position. He can play the shooting guard position, which makes him an ideal fit for the Toronto Raptors. He's a good defender. He's a very, very good ISO scorer as well, guys. I think he goes a little bit underappreciated when we talk about 20-plus point scores in the NBA. I know people will be quick to point out the fact that he plays for a poor team like the Oklahoma City Thunder that don't have a lot of options on offense, but how come we don't see this with the other teams like the Orlando Magic? So again, I think he's a very talented player offensively. Anytime you add someone who's averaging 24 points, and he is 23 years old, he's going to be 24. I believe he's already 24 years old, but he's going to be 24 years old. So it's a perfect age to really bring him onto the Toronto Raptors. You could still develop him a little bit. He's obviously got a lot of tools in his arsenal that he can use to help the Toronto Raptors with the offense. Now, we know the Raptors have a lot of scores. I highlighted this in my last video. They do have 5 15-point scores in their starting lineup, but we do know the Raptors struggle a little bit on the offensive side, particularly when it comes to not only shot creating, but also in the half-court offense. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander does such a good job of not only creating his own shot, but he's also someone who can really be a crafty scorer offensively. When you take a look at him and how he's able to score, you check out some of his highlights. He's able to pull up from the 3. He can drive past defenders, attack the basket. He has a nice Euro step. He's very creative with how he finishes around the rim. He's got a decent jump shot as well, so he would be very ideal for the Toronto Raptors. And he also has a great transition game, which would fit in perfectly with the Toronto Raptors. He finds those guys in transition. He's got a really under-the-radar IQ as well. So he's a smart player, good defensive player. He's listed at 6'6", which would be perfect perfect with what the Raptors are trying to build. Now, there are several factors we do need to take into consideration, despite all of this talk we've had about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and his offensive and defensive talent as well. There's a few things we need to highlight, and that is his contract situation. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will be making about $30 million next season, so I know the Raptors are technically monitoring this situation. And Oklahoma City, by the way, for those who may have not followed this during the offseason, it's still technically the offseason, but they have said they plan on keeping him. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has said that he is planning on staying with Oklahoma City. Now, there's definitely a few factors to take into consideration, taking the fact that he's 24 years old, and Chet Holmgren, who was supposed to be the next big thing in Oklahoma City Thunder, unfortunately had that season-ending foot injury. Now, this becomes very odd because now you have a player who's coming into his own, and in a few years, he's going to be really dominant, who's essentially going to be working with 18, 19, 20-year-olds. This makes it a little bit of a difficult position to be in for Oklahoma City Thunder because now they have this guy who's about 6 years older than a lot of these guys they're trying to develop. So timeline-wise, he doesn't exactly fit there. And honestly, if I'm Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I just don't know what the Oklahoma City Thunder are doing. They could have quickly rebuilt, much like how the Cleveland Cavaliers have, but they just seem like they're going kind of all over the place with some of their picks. Not so much their picks, but just how they're constructing the roster altogether. But let's talk about what I was talking about in my main point here, which is the salary situation. He's making about $30 million, $30.9 million to be exact, going into next season, which makes it a little bit of a challenge. Let's be honest. The Raptors could throw in 3 first-round picks. That's not the case. They still need to match salaries, or at least be close to some of the salaries to bring the total amount near that $30 million. Now, one player that automatically comes to mind for me is Gary Trent Jr. because often we've seen Masai Ujiri talk about the Toronto Raptors core, and Gary Trent Jr. has often been left out of that core for several interviews now. So that's someone I can see possibly being thrown in a trade, but that still doesn't get you close to that $30 million. You would have to throw in someone like a Chris Boucher, maybe a Thaddeus Young to really add in significant salary to that. Gary Trent, believe, is making about $17-18 million, and you would probably need to throw in another $8-10 million, which would be, of course, what Thaddeus Young and Chris Boucher is making, I believe, about $11-12 million. So to get close to that $30.9 million, you probably have to realistically throw in those two players, or not those two players, but one of those players, which makes it really challenging. Again, it's not easy to trade that many players, and also you're going to have to include picks as well. So again, you really have to question whether or Oklahoma City Thunder will accept the trade again, given that they could hold on to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They have no reason to trade him for another season or two, and when his value potentially goes up, then they could look to trade him. But again, his salary, as it progresses throughout the years, as you see there, I'll put the screen up for you guys one more time. In the following season, if the Raptors do wait and they don't trade for him this season, his salary is continuously going up to $33 million, and the following season is $35 million. So again, Gary Trent Jr. is also a free agent next season, so it makes it a little bit challenging to trade for someone that makes that much money without including some guys like Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby. So personally, again, it makes it a little bit of a challenge, not only his salary, but what Oklahoma City actually wants for him and what they would take for him. It becomes a little bit of a challenge. And I know people are going to be quick to throw out names like Fred VanVleet. I just don't see it happening, guys. I know technically they can trade him, and Oklahoma City technically, I mean, they can flip him if, let's pretend for a moment that the Raptors do make that trade happen sooner rather than later, and they throw in 3 first-round picks. They can make that trade happen, and then the Oklahoma City Thunder could flip someone like Fred VanVleet to another team for more picks. So again, it could be a little bit of a challenge to facilitate trades, but maybe they take it, maybe they don't. I think that most likely they would ask for younger players and not someone like a Fred VanVleet who's also just entering his prime. So those are just my thoughts, but we do need to talk about some other things as well. Now, speaking of point production and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I really wanted to highlight this because, as I said, guys, the Raptors really struggle in half-court offense. And when you take a look at his stat here, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, per point possession, he's right up there. Now, this is not in order, guys. I just had his name up there, but he averages about 1.03 points per possession, which is huge. And as you see, Pascal Siakam is there as well. So he would instantly come into the Raptors and provide a lot of offense. He would be perfect. He can play off the ball. He can play with the ball. He can find some of his teammates. He's a good passer. So again, this player just makes so much sense for the Raptors. If there was a player out there, not on the Raptors squad, that really seems like a Raptors type of player, it would be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So whether these reports are true or not, we don't know. We can speculate all we want, but we can't deny the fact that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a Raptors type of player, and he would be really nice on the Toronto Raptors. Now, I do want to hear your thoughts on these rumors. What do you think of this? Do you think the Raptors could potentially throw in some players to acquire Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. How would he fit on the Toronto Raptors? These are some of the things that I would like you guys to answer down in the comment section. So I do want to hear your thoughts on this. So make sure to leave your comments down below. And as always, guys, I do have a trivia question for you today. And that trivia question is, out of these players listed below, who will be paid? Who will be the highest paid player next season? Is it A, LeBron James? Is it B, Kevin Durant? Is it C, Bradley Beal? Or is it D, Damian Lillard? So whoever answers this trivia question correctly first in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video. So that will be it for today's video, guys. So thank you so much for supporting this channel, and I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.